So let's talk a little bit about interviewing and developing your accomplishment statements, because interviewing is not often seen as an opportunity for you to really market yourself in that way. And what we want to do is, when we're seeking that employment, we feel like we're put on the spot in interviews, and we have to mold ourselves into whatever the interviewer needs or that organization. And I want you to take a different approach, and I want you to be able to really focus in on, okay, what are my assets? What are my strengths that I want to spotlight in the interview? And I want you to be able to take control over the message that you're sharing in the interview process to support you finding the right fit for your next opportunity. So we'll spend a little time talking about how to prepare for an interview and a little time talking about how to follow up after an interview. But most of the time we'll spend today is really focusing in on how do you create accomplishment statements that you can use to answer interview questions and really tell your story and spotlight your skills. So I want to get a gauge on where things are at with the group. So Kate's going to share her screen, and we're going to do some annotation. And I want to ask you two questions for you to write some thoughts on the screen here. One thing is, we forget so often what we do well, and we hyper focus on the challenging things. So I want you to take a moment to think about, what do you do well with interviewing? And then I want you to share one of the places that you're getting stuck in the interviewing process. And if you've typed it into chat already, feel free to type it here on the screen as well. So what I see here, thanks everyone for sharing. The reason I ask these questions is that we're all individuals. If there was one kind of right answer in this process, I would definitely give it to you all. But based on our strengths, our different strengths can allow us different strategies in order to get through the things that we get stuck on. And then all of our individual stories, they have overlapping themes, but they are unique in themselves too. And so the more you know about what you do well and where you get stuck, the better you can customize your approach to interviewing to get the best result possible. So what I'm seeing on the do well side, it looks to me, right, that there is preparation that's happening, that people are getting prepared, trying to have some examples in mind, really thinking about how you show up and communicate, being kind, listening, connecting relationships, right, and being detail oriented. So those are all great things to hear. It sounds like the themes on the other side that I'm seeing where we get stuck are in the system, right, in the process of the system where things are happening. Concerns around employment gaps, getting back to the system, right, getting stuck, feeling overwhelmed with the process, also just feeling exhausted in the process when you're going through that. And then there are some specifics around answering some questions, concrete examples, and even with preparation, feeling underprepared for what comes up there. So thanks for taking a moment to think about this. As you're going through and getting yourself prepared for interviews, you want to know what works for you and what's going to keep you calm and confident in that process. So again, there's not necessarily universal things, but if you would like to share some things, you can add into chat as we're talking through what you do to prepare for interviews that works well. Here are some quick things that are helpful. As you're preparing for an interview, make sure that you're researching the organization as much as possible and getting to know what are their characteristics, what are those important components about the organization. Do they mention certain things a lot? What's their mission? What kind of flavor of the organization you can get a feel for, so that you can emphasize how your skills connect with their organization characteristics, or what they value or what's important to them. As you're preparing for interviews as well, right, there's lots of different modes of interviews. There are phone interviews, in-person interviews, lots of virtual interviews happening. There's even the difference of, one-on-one interview and a group interview. And so as much as you can, get the details of the interview and really prepare yourself for that type of interview. It's always important that you're in a comfortable space. You're in a space, especially with phone and virtual, where you're going to have good connection, and as much as you can too, provide the feedback that you would like. So on my phone and virtual appointments, I'm always staring at a smiley face, even if it's just hand drawn of person smiling at me, so that I'm getting some kind of positive feedback. And when I feel like there's a smiling face at me, I'm more animated, I'm more interested in that. So do what you need to do to prepare your space, and eliminate as many distractions as possible. But also be comfortable. Like if your cat walks across your Zoom screen while you're in a virtual interview, that's okay. How you react to that will tell the interviewer about you as well. So introduce them to your cat, share, and then move on and refocus in on what's important to you. A few other things that were on the strong side is really identify, after you research that organization, really identify, okay, what are the top 3 to 5 strengths or attributes that I have that really connect with the organization, connect with this role that you want to highlight in this process, because that's an important one. Interview questions are going to be open questions. They have a direction, but you have the ability to pick, okay, what stories do I share? What skills do I highlight in this process? So often when gathering examples or accomplishment statements, I have a variety of them, but I focus specifically on, okay, I want examples and stories that are going to emphasize my attention to detail, because that's important in this role. So here are the ones that I have, and I have a variety of ways that I can apply them to the different types of interview questions that might come up. So you want those stories and examples to really emphasize the things that are important to that organization and role. So think about those before you go into your interview. What I want to do is get into talking about, okay, what do you do during the interview in order to really market yourself in this process? So one of the components that I like to share with folks to think about is that no matter what interview question someone is asking you, what they are asking you is the interview question, and then what they don't say is, and how does this make you a good fit for this role and our organization? And so it's helpful for you in your head to be thinking about what they're not saying when they're asking that question. So what I mean by that is when they say, tell me about yourself, they don't want to know your whole childhood. They don't want to know everything about you. They are saying, tell me about yourself and how this makes you a good fit for this role and organization. So when you think about the things that you're sharing in that open-ended statement of tell me about yourself, you want to share, your education, your skills, your goals that relate to you being a good fit for the organization. One of the things is that stories evoke emotion and they are more likely to be remembered. And so as much as possible in the interview, if you can think of yourself as a storyteller, not fiction stories. I don't want you to make things up, but I want you to really think about telling the story so that that can stick out in the interviewer's mind. So one framework that you could use for stories, and some of you may be familiar with the STAR method. The accomplishment stories we'll talk about today actually use the PAR method, which it stands for problem, action, and result. STAR and PAR are interchangeable in my mind. STAR stands for situation, task, action, and result. So you can use either in this process, but when you're thinking about the stories, how you're answering behavioral interview questions, you really want to simplify the stories into, okay, what was the problem? What action did you take? And what was the result of the action you took? And this really helps them explaining the problem, helps them see, okay, step into the situation. Okay, what was going on in that time? The action, you want to focus in on the action you took. You're the one being interviewed, and so you want to focus in on the action you took in that process. And then the result that it creates. The action and the result are the most important things and often are the most forgotten when people start to share the stories. So tell them what you did and then what resulted from that. As a result from that, we were able to successfully move forward on our project under budget, ahead of schedule.
I wanted to know when it comes to, like, they ask this question, why do you think you would be a perfect fit for this role? Um, Considering the fact that we're not coming from the background, the one which they are actually looking for, and we are just like a new to this field, like for instance, like it's IT support field. So how do we actually, put ourselves if we are coming from a different uh, background, not from the related field? So how do we put that together? Because that's kind of very confusing for me. I've been thinking over it over and over again, but couldn't figure it out in that regard, like, how to fit myself for that role, and having no experience of IT and just having a theoretical experience. That's it. That's about it.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think there's kind of two components in that. One is you want to think about the assets that you bring from bringing a new perspective and a new mind into that role. So what skills are you bringing from your previous experience or your personal experience that that's probably what drew you to IT in particular. And so share with them those things. And then you want to share with them your ability and process of learning so that even as someone new to this role, this is the process that you will learn. You'll bring some energy into that process. And so that can be some things to bring as you're thinking about that. The other thing to remember is that you should be out there also networking. And so talk to some people who work in IT. They don't necessarily have to work for the organization you're seeking, but ask them, what characteristics are important? What do you use every day? What is this like? So that you can have an idea of what skills are valued there, and you can bring that into the interview and saying, well, I haven't worked in IT, but I am very detail oriented, and I know that in the IT industry, that is a value that I can bring to the table as I'm learning this. I want you to think about a few of the different kind of behavioral interview questions that they might ask, and workshop your own problem, action, result, accomplishment story that you could adjust to these components. So I'm going to give you a couple of prompts in chat for you to think about, and you can select the one that works for you. So these are going to be broad interview questions, but they're going to get you at least thinking about some examples. So often you'll use your accomplishment statement to answer these types of questions. So the questions I'll throw out to you, and Kate will put them into chat as well, are the questions of, tell us about a time when, ... right? Tell us about a time when you worked as a team. Tell us about a time when you faced a challenge at work. Tell us about a time when you've had success. Tell us about a time when you've made a mistake. Tell us about a time when you experienced a conflict at work. So these are just a few prompts that you can think about. I want you to select one that if you've done what Diane's done and you've done all these already, that's okay. Pick one that maybe you haven't spent time on, or maybe you haven't figured out how to fit into your story yet. And then I want you to write out the problem, the action you took, and the result that was created from that, so that you have an example.
I have a question.
Yeah, please share.
How do you answer when did you make a mistake without making yourself look bad to a future employer?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? Because there's always those hidden questions in there. They'll ask you about, like, well, what's your greatest weakness? When have you made a mistake? Those types of questions. And what you want to share with them is be honest. Tell them about a real mistake. Tell them about a real weakness that you have. But then also tell them about what you learned from that mistake, and how because of your awareness of your weakness, you have these things in place in order to support you in being successful. So I would be honest about a mistake there. I'm trying to think of an example. A mistake that I made was going into a big project. I thought we all understood the vision that we are going towards. In the process of going through that project, I noticed that others weren't as motivated. They weren't turning in quality work. And it didn't seem like we were all going in the same direction. So I had to pause our project and take us a step back and take an opportunity for us to all come together and align on the vision of what we were trying to accomplish. And then from there, we were able to move forward on the same page, and folks felt more motivated, as well as turned in higher quality work, and we were able to complete the project 2 weeks after the deadline, but we were able to move forward once we took that intentional pause. So that's an example of talking about a mistake, but talking about what you learned from it. What were the actions you took in there? Does that help a little bit?
Right. Try and keep it professional.
Hey, everyone.
Hey.
Hi. Yeah. Thank you all for putting this together. So I'm going to answer the interview question. Tell me about a time when you made a mistake.
Great. Everyone wants to hear this.
Yes. So we're right smack in the middle of an investigation because I work in automotive quality, and I accidentally provided wrong data, which misled the direction of the investigation. However, as soon as I found out, I did send out an email to my direct manager, letting him know, I had goofed, and I apologized and I volunteered, to help every other team member, since we were supposed to course correct, to help them catch up, because I knew it'd be a lot of work on everybody's part. And then I also, in the email, I told him what I was going to be doing to ensure that a mistake of that nature didn't happen again. And it turned out that they appreciated the sincerity, and things didn't go too bad.
Yeah, so that's a great example. And what that tells me about you as an individual is you will own your mistakes, right? You didn't try to pass it off to someone else. You own your mistakes, and you'll do the extra work to support your team in that process. And as if I were an interviewer on the other side, those are characteristics that I would like to have as an individual on my team too. So I think that's a really good example of providing, brief enough detail, but also talking about the actions you took and the result that you could create. Thanks for sharing that.
You're welcome. Thank you too.
The last thing as we're wrapping up that I want to share with you is the after an interview. Well, the interview's over, right? No, it is not. The interview is not over. Every interaction you have with the organization, with the people that interacted with you, is part of the interview process. And so make sure that you're following up with a thank you and appreciation. And if you had that question of, oh, what mistake have you made in the past, and you didn't answer it the way that you would have liked to, then in that thank you, say, oh, this came to mind to me that might be helpful, since I wasn't able to think clearly in the moment when you all asked the question. Here are my thoughts about a mistake I've made in the past. Thank you for your time, and send that along. So if you, as I often do, walk away from an interview and think, oh man, I should have done this, you can do that in the thank you, and you can do that in the follow-up. So make sure that you don't forget about that being an opportunity as well. Thanks for your time and your perspective. I know we didn't get to all of the concerns, all of the challenges you all are facing, but I hope that you can take some thoughts away from the accomplishment statements and how you can craft those to really spotlight the skills, and really think about it from the employer's perspective. Why would this be important? How does this demonstrate that you are right for the role?